oil spill disaster, there was new trouble a mile deep in the Gulf of Mexico and on the surface along the coast. It began with yet another snag on the seabed at the site of the blown well. A diamond-edged saw got stuck as it tried to cut through the main oil gushing pipe. That halted the latest attempt to contain the geyser of petroleum.
Anybody that's ever used a saw knows every once in a while it will bind up.
National Incident Commander Thad Allen briefed reporters this morning near Houma, Louisiana.
The goal is later on today to finish that cut and then to be able to put a containment device over the top of the wellhead and start containing the oil, bring it to the surface, and actually flare off the gas and actually produce product moving forward.
Hours later, there was word that the remote-controlled subs had freed the saw, but still a giant cloud of raw crude kept spewing from the well, and it will likely get worse before it gets better.
We don't anticipate the flow of oil to increase until the second cut is done. Our flow rate technical group has estimated the potential for a 20% increase once that cut is made. It has not been made yet. In the meantime, the leak at the kink in the riser pipe is being treated with subsea dispersants.
It's been more than 6 weeks since the Deepwater Horizon rig exploded and sank.
There's been a lot of talk about these so-called oil plumes, the underwater, I think you call them submerged oil fields, which are still growing or spreading, depending on how you define them. There has been a ship out doing some testing on these patches of oil, the Gordon Gunter, which is from NOAA. Can you tell us what they found or what the tests on the samples they've taken have shown?
The NOAA ship Gordon Gunter is out near the well site. It has been doing a variety of sampling to identify things characterized previously as anomalies to try to understand exactly what they are and where they are. Obviously, it's more likely than not that there is oil in the water column in the general vicinity of the well. The Gunter is identifying where that might be and getting good images of that. Clear identification of what those anomalies are, though, will require sampling of the water and whatever is in it, and then analyses of those in the laboratory. I was just on another
Okay, let's look at something here, folks. 15 miles off of Pensicola.
Nancy Kinner at the University of New Hampshire. I want to ask you, Professor Kinner, about this new model we showed a few minutes ago from the National Center for Atmospheric Research, essentially showing how a liquid in the Gulf of Mexico with these currents could go around Florida and reach the Atlantic Ocean by the summer. How realistic is that scenario?
Well, I think you have to look at the model itself and understand a couple of caveats, a couple of things about it. One thing, as you pointed out, this is just a model looking at if we put a dye, something that actually just moves with the water and doesn't degrade at all, where it would go over time. And that's not really how the oil will behave. So what this model does is it looks at the oil in the top about 60 feet or so of the water column, and it basically looks at a set of scenarios about where that water might move. Now, over those kinds of time periods, many, many days, the oil actually what we call weathers, which means that the oil changes in character. So some of it evaporates, some of it actually breaks down in the light, some of it actually biodegrades. Bacteria over the longer term like that, over many days to weeks, actually start breaking the oil down. And what happens is, that's very different from what was modeled, is that the oil actually becomes stickier and starts to form what we call tar balls, and you've seen some of those in the pictures of the Gulf. There are anywhere from very, very tiny, small balls that you could barely see up to about the size of your thumbnail. And so they will travel very differently, as you can imagine, than would just the water itself. So that's one thing that we have to keep in mind. And the second thing is that when you looked at the visual of the model, remember that the color tells you something about the dilution of what's happening. And so this model is basically, when you see those kind of those yellowish hues or colors, those are fairly low concentrations of the oil. So those are two very important things to keep in mind.
And I just want to say, you know, if for one, just to look at that picture, it could be fairly alarming, and we should say that the people who put this out at the National Center for Atmospheric Research were careful themselves to say that this is just a scenario, that they're not saying necessarily that this is what would happen to the oil. But based on what you said, could the oil end up doing anything like what you see in that that form or that scenario they put together?
Well, I think that one has to understand that there's a lot of oil coming out of the well, and that it is quite likely that some small amount of that oil will get out into the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, I think most scientists think that that is going to happen. However, it probably isn't going to be large quantities of oil, and it certainly isn't going to be large slicks of oil. In fact, the oil, as it keeps moving, that which is in the surface water, that oil starts to, as I mentioned, kind of break up and become what we call streamers, and then ultimately these tar balls. So I think it is quite likely that some small percentage of the oil will get out into the Atlantic. If the oil flow can be stopped down, then I think it'll be less and less oil going out there.
Well, we will have many more days to think about that, but it's helpful to take a look at it right now. Nancy Kinner, we thank you, and Don Van Nieuwenhuis, we thank you both for talking with us.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.